Police Training Council. If we could all rise, we'll have pledge of allegiance to the flag led by Chief Parisi.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could all remain standing for a moment of silence for all those serving in the public safety arena and in the military, for all their sacrifice and service. Thank you. We start the final session of this year with addition to the law and the executive law regarding the makeup of the council. And going forward, instead of having 8, we're going to have 10, and they'll be representing different disciplines. Several appointments await to be done. There's the superintendent of state police now is officially a member by law and can designate someone to represent him here. The NYPD commissioner can as well can designate a deputy commissioner to represent and be a member of the council. And we look forward to others. We used to always have to have 5 in order to have a quorum, in order to pass certain regulations, especially Part 6000 issues. Now we will have to have 6, as I understand it, to pass those type of issues. We don't have any of those types of issues that would go to the governor on the agenda today, but we certainly do from time to time. I know that the new commissioner, Rosado, wants to make some remarks. And I don't know if you want to do that now, Ms. Rosado, or we can go around the room and I'll do some introductions as well. We could do that first? Or?
Yeah, let's do the introductions first.
Okay, so let me start from my left and we'll go around the room, and that's just who you are and who you represent.
Bruce McBride, Commissioner of Police, SUNY, retired.
Ken Corey, Chief of Training, New York City Police Department.
Mary Clark, Deputy Superintendent, New York State Police Employee Relations.
Johanna Sullivan, DCJS. Can you go back there, please?
Todd Murray, DCJS, Office of Public Safety.
Hi, Todd.
Sarah Dean, Office of Public Safety, DCJS.
Robert Gregory, Assistant Deputy Superintendent for Employee Relations, New York State Police.
Kevin Fairchild, DCJS, Office of Public Safety.
Gabe Maruso, DCJS, Office of Public Safety.
Okay. Allison Floyd, DCJS, Office of Public Safety.
Michael Puckett, DCJS, Office of Public Safety.
Joshua Vineout, DCJS, Office of Public Safety.
Colleen Gladden, Office of Legal Services at DCJS.
Joe Popkin, Executive Deputy Commissioner at DCJS.
Welcome, Joe.
Steve Mahaney, DCJS, Office of Public Safety.
Tom Mitchell, Counsel with the New York State Sheriff's Association.
Brian Garvey, Associate Counsel, DCJS.
Okay.
Holly Snyder, DCJS, Office of Public Safety.
Okay.
Tim Parisi, Chief in Ilion Police Department, representing New York State Association of Chiefs.
Okay. All right. Before we take some action on some items, maybe Ms. Rosado, Commissioner, or Acting Commissioner, I guess.
Thank you for having me. This is actually my second day here at DCJS, and so far it's been wonderful. We hope to keep that. I'm grateful for this opportunity to say good morning. The staff told me what to say, and I'm going to stick to that to be safe today. So while yesterday was my first day, I've been with the state now for 6 years. I was Secretary of State for the last almost 6 years. And I also, in addition to being Secretary of State, I've chaired the Governor's Council on Community Reentry and Reintegration. So I've been involved in criminal justice reform and issues for a long time before I came to government, and all the time I've been here, mostly on the side of docs and reentry. For me, criminal justice has been a lifelong personal and professional passion. It became my inspiration for public service. Before that, I had 30-year career in media, which I enjoyed and loved. And then one day I said, I just want to take a deep dive into criminal justice. And as a media executive, I was an editor, a publisher, and producer. I was moved by the stories of society's most vulnerable and drawn toward the people and places that our social services all too often fail to reach. And that led me to leave a CEO job and seek government service. When I joined the state in 2016, I was fortunate to be able to focus on reentry and reintegration issues for justice-involved people, working closely with the governor's office, DOCS, DCJS, local governments, and community partners. This focus grew in part from my time as a distinguished lecturer at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, where I taught courses in several of New York's prisons, and where eventually I got my master's from John Jay as well. Now I am grateful for the opportunity to lead DCJS and look forward to working with all of you and other criminal justice stakeholders as we continue efforts to move our justice system forward and ensure that it works fairly, equitably, and efficiently for all New Yorkers. My mandate from the governor is that everybody cares about public safety, and all of us involved in the infrastructure that we call criminal justice, law enforcement, we're also humans too, and we want to address that humanity in the same way that we address that when we go into prisons. As a member of the MPTC, the work you have done to overhaul and update the basic course for police officers and to develop regulations to implement the Professional Policing Act of 2021, among other efforts, is critical to the state's work to help ensure the integrity, trust, and public confidence in our law enforcement agencies and the officers that they recruit, train, develop, and deploy throughout our neighborhoods. It is beyond a doubt that the comprehensive training for police and peace officers is more important now than ever, given the challenges facing law enforcement and the many roles they have adopted within their jurisdictions. I believe our job here is to help you. Over the coming months, I look forward to working with you and all of our talented DCJ Office of Public Safety team to continue to advance New York's law enforcement profession and ultimately to better serve New Yorkers. And in my mind, because it is New York, we should lead the nation. In the meantime, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, Executive Deputy Commissioner Joe Popkin, or Deputy Commissioner Mike Wood. Thank you, Chairman Spike, for the opportunity to speak, and I turn the agenda back to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Appreciate your remarks, and welcome back to criminal justice, as they say, and we look forward to working with you. Joe, the Executive Deputy, any remarks you'd like to make? Or?
No, the Commissioner said it all, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, too, as well. And so thank you. Thank you. As for, I don't know if, Mary, you can vote today for the superintendent. And have you been to one of our meetings before?
I have not.
Okay, and within the agenda, just so we're all aware, the motions that will have to be made are specifically written out and have been looked at by the legal staff to make sure that what's on the record is correct. And so what we do, if we do make a motion, then I ask that the individual council member read those motions verbatim so that they're read into the record accordingly, and then we'll vote from there. And a lot of times we take turns doing that. We've got the new dates on the agenda for next year are there. We've got to discuss some course exemptions for the NYPD, which we've discussed in the past, and we've taken a good look at that. Instructor development course and the opioid antagonist update. And then we got some informational items. And then I do have an item for new business discussion as well. So we have the agenda before us. I would seek a motion to accept the agenda before us.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Dr. McBride, second by Chief Parisi. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, that motion is approved and the agenda is accepted and adopted. The 255th minutes were sent out to us. Thanks again, Allison, for doing that. And we've had an opportunity to review those and look at them from the meeting back in September. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes as written. A motion by, I call you chief, Ken, I can?
Call me whatever you like.
Well, yeah, I just want to call you Ken, and yet, you know, I should call you chief, but second, please, someone would second for the minutes? So Chief Parisi, okay, any further discussion on those? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes from the 255th meeting are hereby accepted. All right, the first thing on the agenda as an action item is the adoption of the 2022 meeting dates that we propose out there, those being March 9th, June 1st, September 7, and December 7. The executive law does require 4 meetings a year. And obviously, we could call an emergency meeting or a special meeting if we needed to. Any discussion? I would make a motion myself that we adopt those dates at this time. And do I hear a second?
So moved.
Okay, a second by Dr. McBride. Any further discussion on those dates? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and any opposed? None? All right, those dates are hereby adopted. Thank you. Okay, the first other item here is the basic course for the NYPD that we've discussed in the past on some exemptions that we've talked about. Josh Feinhout, you're going to lead on that? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the council. I would like to just briefly note too, and Chairman, I failed to mention this to you, that Natasha Harvin from the Office of Legal Services, as well as Deputy Commissioner Mike Wood and Mark White from DCGS are also on the line. Due to the technology issues, we can't broadcast their video on these screens here.
Okay.
But they are on the line. So Natasha is obviously here for any answers in terms of legal questions that come up.
Well, Natasha will keep me on the ball. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. So good morning again. As the chairman mentioned, this past September meeting, Chief Corey presented to the council as an informational item a request for exemptions from the basic course for police officer for the New York City Police Department. Just a little background before we get into those exemption requests. As part of the Professional Policing Act, there was a series of changes in statutes and additions and amendments, and Executive Law 840, subsection H, was specifically repealed as part of the Professional Policing Act. And that section of the law previously gave the NYPD the ability to obtain a full exemption from the basic course for police officers. With the repeal of that exemption, the NYPD would now have to meet the minimum standard of the basic course for police officers as prescribed by the MPTC. And that date for meeting that standard was effective October 16th, 2021. So any new courses approved by the Office of Public Safety after October 16th, 2021 would have to meet the minimum standard prescribed by the MPTC. And as I mentioned also, and I believe for the council members, the memo that was prepared by Commissioner Shea for those exemption requests that delineated those specific sections for exemption and the reasons behind them are provided in your information packets as well as a reference point. But I do know they were shared, back in September, and Chief Corey went through each individual point as part of that memo. So OPS staff worked hand in hand with New York City Police Department back in August. We began the process of reviewing their curriculum against the current BCPO minimum standard curriculum. First of all, I'd like to say the collaboration has been excellent. We look forward as we move forward in future updates to the basic course and enhancing police training the continued collaboration with NYPD. I think we can learn from them, and they can certainly learn from us too as well. It goes, back and forth conversation to continue to enhance police training. So the discussions were great in August, and as we discussed and worked through some of the sections, NYPD identified several sections that they would like to request an exemption from, and those are up on the screen. They're specifically to basic crash management and reporting, recognizing the cannabis impaired motorist, DWI detection and standardized field sobriety testing. There's a theme there with crash management and SFSD testing. Request an exemption from the emergency medical services, and request an exemption from the behavioral observation suspicious activity recognition section, as well as not a full exemption from the physical fitness and wellness section, but an exit standard only exemption. And I'll get into more details for each of those sections. When we did the comparison and the review, NYPD shared with us, their learning objectives for the their entire basic training course, and juxtapose those against the learning objectives for the basic course for police officers, and we found enormous similarity. The job is the job, so to speak. What a law enforcement officer does in New York City is very similar to what a law enforcement officer does in upstate New York, outside the boroughs of New York City. But what we realize, and as mentioned in Commissioner Shea's memo, that NYPD has unique resources and manpower to set up specialized units, and meaning they have specialized designated traffic units and other units that receive specialized training that agencies in upstate New York might not have those resources to have specialized training. As a result, an officer in upstate New York may need to have training specifically for, say, standardized field sobriety testing. NYPD has specialized units that conduct standardized field sobriety testing. So as we took that into consideration, that some of the specialized units would eliminate the need for some of the same skill set training that occurs outside the boroughs of New York City. And also we recognize too, all the currently now 706 hours plus reality-based training, the standard that exists for the BCPO, because the NYPD was exempt from from the BCPO requirements, a lot of the updates to the course were made without NYPD's input. As we move forward and we update certain new sections of the course and continually to revise and look at content as policing changes in the 21st century, we'll further collaborate with NYPD on specifically on some of these sections as well, in addition to the other sections. So it just fully recognizes, as we consider these exemptions, that at the time of development of many of these sections, the NYPD was not involved in that process. So it explains why they're requesting some of these exemption requests. And obviously the reasons delineated in the memo too that were outlined too for some of the reasons for the exemption. What I would like to propose to the council and OPS as they conducted the review is for these sections that were identified in the previous slide, again, back up on the screen, with the exception of physical fitness, we would like to grant the NYPD full exemption from these sections with a specific caveat. First of all, physical fitness wouldn't be a full exemption. They would still be required to do the 65 hours of physical fitness, but the exit standard could be slightly different, but this would apply to all agencies. And I'll get more into that, but the sections, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 bullet points, the first 5 bullet points on the screen, those we are specifically proposing to the council to grant full exemptions from the NYPD on these sections. With a caveat to that. Any exemptions that are granted, anybody who goes through the New York City Police Academy and completes the basic training that is prescribed by the Municipal Police Training Council, any of these sections that are granted full exemption, the individual who would either transfer to another agency or be hired by another agency coming out of the academy would have to complete a conversion course. And the conversion course would consist of these sections minus the physical fitness section. that would need to be completed in their entirety. So for instance, you may look at like, an example is recognizing the cannabis impaired motorist. Rather than piecemealing and saying you need to complete certain sections of that course, because that course is built on the premise and the foundation of standardized field sobriety testing, and for the reasons outlined in the memo why standardized field sobriety testing is not probably the best course of action to require all recruits in the NYPD to receive, by granting only a partial exemption to that section, it would basically, the foundational component of recognizing the cannabis impaired motorist is built on the standardized field sobriety testing component. So by not requiring standardized field sobriety testing, it would fragment the delivery of the recognizing the cannabis impaired motorist course as well, because the foundational of that section of the basic recruit is built on standardized field sobriety testing. So as we looked at all of these sections, it made more sense to just grant the full exemption rather than having fragmented deliveries of the sections, and instead require that anybody coming out of the NYPD and transfers to another agency or is an individual that goes to the NYPD that is hired by another agency while in the NYPD Academy, upon exit of the academy and transferring to another agency or working for another police department, that particular individual would have to complete this conversion course within 1 year of being appointed as a police officer. And that's be consistent with general municipal law. So that's in a nutshell, that's our proposal, is to request full exemptions from these sections, and anybody coming out of NYPD course would have to complete that conversion course. And that conversion course would consist of That conversion course would consist of 97 hours total of training, which appears on the screen. And those are the sections that we, again, are requesting full exemption from. So on to the physical fitness and wellness component. What we propose is, instead of granting a full exemption from the physical fitness and wellness component, is to modify the instructional objective of the physical fitness section. That's a 65-hour component in the basic course for police. And that would mean the addition of the language that's in red font that appears in front of you on the screen. I believe it's also in your packet as well for a motion request. I believe it's motion number 6 off the top of my head. What we'd like to do is the current hiring standards and the exit standard for the basic course for police is based on achieving the 40th percentile of the Cooper gender norm standard, as well as meeting the 50th percentile of the Cooper standard to exit the basic course for police. NYPD's job standard their physical fitness test battery is slightly different than the Cooper standard. However, just like the Cooper standard at the time that was validated, NYPD's job standard test for physical fitness ability has been properly validated as well. And they've shared with me the validation study that was conducted. I've spoken with a vendor as well. So what we would like to do is, and this would be applicable to any agency, is to allow for an agency to either train to the 50th percentile of the current Cooper standard that exists for exit of the basic course for police officer, or allow an agency to meet a physical fitness standard that has been properly validated, demonstrating job relatedness to the physical tasks necessary to be performed by a police officer. So basically it gives you two options. You can either do the 50th percentile Cooper standard, meet that, or you could substitute that for any properly validated physical fitness standard that has been properly validated according to the American Disabilities Act and federal guidelines. So that would allow flexibility for not only NYPD, but any other agency that has a job standard, physical fitness job standard that has been properly validated to show that it's specifically related to the physical tasks of the job, and the individual who's able to pass that physical fitness test can demonstrate those physical tasks.
Who does the validation?
The validation would be done by, most likely, a consulting agency would do the validation study. It's a lengthy process. You can build physical fitness standard from the ground up, meaning you would conduct a job task analysis to identify what are the physical tasks that are required of the job. Then from there, you would conduct a study to determine what are the actual tasks, physical tasks that need to be tested, and to validate that, to prove that then that those physical tasks, for instance, push-ups or sit-ups or run or hurdling a fence or running up or pulling a dummy or pulling a trigger of a firearm or showing, being able to exert force, all those tasks have to be validated to show that they're related specifically to the job tasks that are required to be performed by a police officer. So it's always a lengthy process to do. You can also do a transportability study where someone who's already done a validation study, you can transport their study. But again, you have to then show that the job tasks are related specifically to that agency that you're looking to transport that study to. And then you have to further do validation to show that the study that you're transporting is an accurate predictor that an individual can demonstrate these physical tasks that are required of the job. So there are some options available, but at this time, I think this will allow for the most flexibility for agencies to either, again, address the 50th percentile Cooper standard or meet a different physical fitness standard that has been properly validated according to federal guidelines and American Disability Act, which NYPD has gone through. And I think it was instituted back in early 2005 or 2005.
So the Office of Public Safety would approve the validation? Is that what you're?
No, we wouldn't do it because a researcher would have to demonstrate the validation study shows that the physical tasks that are being required are directly related to the job tasks. So if a person can say, for instance, there's an obstacle course that comes up as part of the physical task, you would have to show that that obstacle course directly correlates to the physical tasks that are required to the job to be performed. So by hurdling a fence, you're demonstrating that hurdling the fence is a job task that was identified through the job task analysis, is a physical task that has to be done. So you have to validate and show correlation between the two.
But ultimately, DCGS has to sign off on it? No, or no?
No, DCGS wouldn't sign off on it. You would, as an agency, would have to show that it's been properly validated.
Okay.
And NYPD very generously shared all of this with Josh and with our staff, and it's quite a lengthy, involved process with a researcher and study and analysis and surveys and quite involved. So if they've gone through that entire process and validated that, then that would be something that would be eligible for this.
What if somebody wanted to use their model, exact model?
Josh,
there's an option for that too, which is it's actually in the federal guidelines that allows for that. Instead of building something from the ground up, they call the transportability study, meaning transporting one agency study to your agency. But to do that, you don't have to research and develop what are the actual physical components of that test battery. You're actually just saying, okay, are these physical test components that have been done and validated by another agency, is my job the same as that agency? And then you have to further just ensure that those physical test components are then accurate predictors of your agency's job task. So you're not building from the ground up, but you're just taking another study, but you still have to go through the validation, and that's all required as part of federal guidelines, because it's recognizing that the job in and of itself is discriminatory because of the physical tasks that are required. So you have to demonstrate why your physical fitness hiring standards are essentially discriminatory through the validation process, if that makes sense.
It does. Oh.
Right.
Does this open up a larger issue about the use of the Cooper standard right now? Forget about the NYPD for a little bit, but
we're looking into the issue and reviewing it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, it is definitely an area of interest for us, and we're looking at great length with some of the, as we said, a great partnership with NYPD, looking at how they did that to see if that's a direction that we can move in as the state as a whole.
It seems to me that many of the academies are using Cooper come in at 40 percentile and then graduate at 60 or
We
maybe
graduated 70.
70? So, okay. So by adopting this, then we're going to be saying 50 would be the mark, or we just keep?
50 has always been the mark, and
Okay.
that was what was part of the validation study.
Okay.
Anything else, Josh, you want to?
Yeah, just be clear, the language in black for the ejected, that has always been there. It's just that the red is the new addition. So it's always has been to exit the academy, you have the standard that was determined, it was the 50th percentile. That needs to be, because at the 50th percentile, you were demonstrating that you could perform the physical job tasks required of the job.
Okay.
And some, some have increased it, which they can obviously do. That's just that's the bottom line standard, but they can increase it and go to 60%, and that's fine. Still within compliance.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I can move to the motions and we can go to each individual section.
Yeah,
if you have any questions.
There's 8 motions involved with this entire thing. I think maybe we should, before we go through all that, I'm wondering if it's okay with Natasha or whatever, if we could read off those 8 motions and then take a vote on all 8 motions. Sometimes I can do that and sometimes I can't. But it's a lot of reading as well.
Natasha, can you hear us there?
Instead of voting on each one separately.
Are we good to do it that way, Natasha?
I'm gonna, and then I'll have discussion before.
I'm sorry, Natasha, are we good to do it that way? I did just hear a second ago.
I always try to stay on Natasha's good side.
She says no, you can't.
Let's try that back. Natasha, can you try again? I think we got a little louder for you.
I know. It's great, it works.
Sometimes if you,
Sometimes we can do it, sometimes we can't do it.
or maybe that's just.
She makes it up as it goes on.
Yeah, just one vote, all 8. Yeah.
Oh, Josh is here to assist us.
There's the IT guy.
That was fast.
Can anyone hear me? It's Mike Wood here.
Yeah, we can hear you, Mike.
All right,
think you're
Natasha just sent a message because I'm online here and said that's okay to do it that way. She said, I'm fine with it as long as it's clean, no objections.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
That's my service I'm providing today.
Before whoever wants to make these and read 8 motions here, before we go there, let's have discussion on what we're proposing here. Dr. McBride, you have?
Yeah, I had obviously a lot of questions about the exemptions, but I think that the memo that was written by Commissioner Shea outlined the fact that a lot of the materials are covered in some form or fashion. For example, the officers of NYPD, okay, they don't take the whole emergency medical services course, but they do have, standard first aid response and things of that nature. And the same thing for securing a scene at a crash site, and then they leave for the special units to come. I guess two things. In the discussions that we had before and some of the materials, are outside agencies attending NYPD for basic school?
So a few, MTA Police.
Okay.
And we've done SUNY Downstate, Amtrak. Those are really the only agencies we get on a regular basis.
So when their personnel graduate, are they have to go to a conversion course, or would they be granted?
That's a DCJS question.
I think it depends if in statute they're required to meet the basic course for police officer standards. If they're required, then yes, they would have to do the conversion course.
Okay. Yeah, I know with SUNY, they would have to take the MPTC, standard. So that would be something that, that would probably have to be, may have to be reviewed. And I guess in the, looking into the future with stop, question, and frisk, if the federal monitor ends the oversight of that, would you continue with the course the way it is, or would you make some changes? And I guess this is looking into the future.
So with the portion of the course surrounding investigative encounters and Terry stops?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's all been reviewed and approved by the federal court. I don't think we would deviate from that.
Okay.
A number of advocates have weighed in on that, legal advocates, all 5 district attorneys, the U.S. attorneys. So, they all find it to be in compliance. Our concerns in that area really only surrounded the BOSAR module, right? Behavioral observation, suspicious activity reporting, which, again, we feel is adequately covered by a course that's delivered by
FEMA.
Thank you, by FEMA. To us, we just don't use that exact curriculum. Again, we teach the material, we just don't teach it quite the same way.
Okay, thank you.
As I understood, you've got a class that started in October.
Yes, sir.
If these exemptions pass today, are you going by the old way or by these new exemptions, or how?
So that class was hired prior to the October 16th effective date. So I think technically speaking, they're not bound by the basic course for police officers. That said, every other portion of the curriculum at this point matches, it is in full compliance with the standards set forth by the MPTC.
Okay, all right, yep. Very good, thank you.
Bruce, if I could just mention one thing, just because you had raised it, as part of each of the motions, and this is very similar to whenever we do any exemption, is that, if the course, MPTC course changes, or if the NYPD course changes, then the exemption will have to be revisited.
Okay.
To sort of your issue and your question before. So if something on our end changes or something on their end changes, we'd have to kind of revisit that here at the council.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, initially, the 97 hours was a little concerning to me. The one that jumped out at me was the emergency medical services, the number of hours there. But I've worked myself through the material and everything that was provided, and I do want to just affirm that Narcan training is a part of that.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, and then you're in compliance with Brianna's law. Every couple of, I think it's every 2 years.
2 years.
2 years?
Everyone is retrained in CPR basic first aid every 2 years.
Yep. And being from the rural part of New York State, it's hard to wrap around the idea that FDNY and EMS are right there.
6 minutes or less.
Yeah. So but I'm okay with it. So I don't have any other questions. Chief, anything?
No, I understand the purpose of the exemptions, and I think they're reasonable.
Okay. Mary, any concerns?
No, I'm good with them.
Okay. Anything else you want to say, Ken? Or?
No.
Okay. All right. So who wants to read off 8 motions?
Well, Sheriff, I'd be happy to read off the motions, as I believe I have to abstain from the vote, since it impacts my agency. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So
Thank you.
I'll enjoy hearing you read.
I'll second the motion.
He's from the city, so he can talk really fast.
That's true, yes.
I don't even want to hear how fast I can go. I could put a quick Brooklyn accent on too, if that works. All right, so motion 1. The NYPD must complete the basic course for police officers prescribed by the council. Still meeting the minimum standards of training prescribed by the council, exempt the NYPD from the requirements of Part 7, Section F, Basic Crash Management and Reporting for Basic Course for Police Officer, beginning on or after October 16th, 2021. The exemption will need to be reviewed if there are any future changes to MPTC requirements or NYPD course content related to this section. Motion 2, the NYPD must complete the basic course for police officers prescribed by the council, still meeting the minimum standards of training prescribed by the council, exempt NYPD from the requirements of Part 4, Section R, recognizing the cannabis impaired motorist for basic course for police officer beginning on or after October 16th, 2021. The exemption will need to be reviewed if there are any future changes to MPTC requirements or NYPD course content related to this section will need to be reviewed for continued exemption approval. Motion 3, the NYPD must complete the basic course for police officers prescribed by the council, still meeting the minimum standards of training prescribed by the council, exempt NYPD from the requirements of Part 4, Section Q, DWI detection and standardized field sobriety testing for basic course for police officers beginning on or after October 16, 2021. The exemption will need to be reviewed if there are any future changes to MPTC requirements or NYPD course content related to this section will need to be reviewed for continued exemption approval. Motion 4, the NYPD must complete the basic course for police officers prescribed by the council, still meeting the minimum standards of training prescribed by the council, exempt NYPD from the requirements of Part 4, Section K, emergency medical services, provided that basic life support training is instructed in compliance with statutory requirements, Brianna's law, and basic first aid training is instructed. This exemption applies to basic course for police officers beginning on or after October 16, 2021. The exemption will need to be reviewed if there are any future changes to MPTC requirements or NYPD course content related to this section will need to be reviewed for continued exemption approval. Motion 5, the NYPD must complete the basic course for police officers prescribed by the council, still meeting the minimum standards of training prescribed by the council, exempt NYPD from the requirements of Part 6, Section B, behavioral observation and suspicious activity recognition for basic course for police officers beginning on or after October 16, 2021. The exemption will need to be reviewed if there are any future changes to MPTC requirements or NYPD course content related to this section will need to be reviewed for continued exemption approval. Motion 6, amend Part 2, Section D, physical fitness and wellness to read, perform at or above the 50th percentile in the areas of muscular endurance and cardiovascular capacity, or meet a physical fitness standard that has been properly validated, demonstrating job relatedness to the physical tasks necessary to be performed by a police officer. This instructional objective applies to the basic course for police officers or equivalency beginning on or after October 16, 2021. Motion 7, approve the course topics, hours, and learning objectives consistent with the MPTC basic course for police officers as the minimum standard of instruction for the MPTC NYPD basic conversion course. And motion 8, require any sworn police officer who completed a basic course for police officers, NYPD, and transfers to or is employed by a police agency other than NYPD to complete the MPTC NYPD basic conversion course as required by General Municipal Law, Section 209Q.
All right, thank you. And second, Dr. McBride? Seconds all those motions? Okay. Any further discussion on those 8 motions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And recognize the abstention. Thank you. All right, those motions all pass. Just for an informational thing, Josh, on the last motion 8 on that the lateral transfer issue, who catches that? Quite frankly, someone wants to transfer out of NYPD after they've been here a few years, go to an upstate agency. Does civil service flag that, or do they contact you that they have to do this additional training? How does that? What's the mechanism that catches that, or isn't there one? Or do we have to think about?
There's a
that?
mechanism.
Yeah.
I'll defer to the director.
So, I mean, fortunately, I have Sarah here, but when anybody comes onto a new department, right, they have to come onto the registry, and then they'll
Right.
be checked to see whether or not they have a
All
basic
right.
course.
So
and
it's
what
the,
previous.
it's the registry that'll flag it?
Yes,
Okay.
so we'll catch it on that end.
Gotcha. Okay, good.
Sarah, if I'm wrong, you can correct me.
You're correct.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you, thank you. All right, and I just want to say, on behalf, Ken, thank you for you and your staff working with DCJS and all the work that was put into this. We all appreciate that, and
Well, I would like to thank the council for their diligence and attention, and I would like to also commend the DCJS staff for their collaboration and professionalism. They've been nothing but great partners through really navigating what's uncharted waters, I think, for both of our agencies
Yep.
here.
Yep.
And obviously, from my end, we could not be happier, again, with the professionalism and cooperation that we received. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is the instructor development course update. Michael Puckett. Mike, go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the council. Going to present to you updates to the instructor development course, and for those, or MOI in the New York City Police Department. But this is a 2-week course to prepare new instructors on the basics of instructing new police officers or police officers in any topic, right? This is the general topics instruction. And it was developed originally in the 1990s. We took a review in the early 2000s, I believe 2000, last comprehensive review of the course. And it serves as the foundation for all police instructors at the basic course level, and then the specialty topics instructors, firearms instructor, defensive tactics instructor, reality-based training instructor, and things like that. And so we wanted to take a refresh in the process of looking at this course again. We determined that the course itself is still sound. The learning, the way that people learn, the ways that you can get a person to learn are still the same essentially as they were in the early 2000s. No surprise. We commiserated and checked with some other similar organizations like ours, training and standards bureaus from around the nation, specifically Wisconsin and Ohio, and they found essentially the same thing when they reviewed their courses, which are very similar to ours. There are some consistencies across our experience and their experience as well, where online learning has emerged in the interim. And this is an area where we don't address within the IDC, and theirs is consistent. And also there's probably a need for some continuing education when it comes to hard skills acquisition. That was something else. Practical application, right? We do a lot of classroom experience training, but practical application is probably lacking a little bit. However, the basic 2 weeks we think is a good overview. We looked at the lesson plans in existence now. We consulted with a behavioral analyst, and we consulted with several police officer instructors that have experience with running the instructor development course. They're master instructors that have consistent experience in running this course to understand better where some of the issues may present. And so we present to you a light refresh, I would call it, on the instructor development course. We removed some things we thought were problematic in our experience just because they were more confusing than they were beneficial to the course content. We added examples where we think examples would be useful to add clarity. One of the things that's changed over the course of the years is that DCJS staff used to largely deliver this course, and they were traveling instructors that would go around the state and they would consistently deliver this course over and over. The model now is more that it's done at the local level, and you have experienced instructors still doing that, but they're not the same instructors over and over and over again from around the state. So we added some things there, that some pieces of the material that we think add clarity, some examples that we think add clarity to the course. I can answer some specifics. I didn't include the objectives here on the screen, but I did include them in the action item. If you have any questions about specifics, they show some of the modifications, minor modifications, a few instructional objectives that were removed or clarified, or frankly, wording just changed because it was scary. To be honest with you, psychology of learning is something that scares a lot of cops. We just changed it to principles of learning to be more accurate and to seem less scary, to be quite honest with you. Nobody likes teaching them psychology of learning section, right? They think it's harder than it has to be. So simple word changes, things like that. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have about the course, the way it's delivered, or about the changes that we've made or the process of review. I do want to give a thank you to the folks that helped us review, Lieutenant Stephen Grassman from the University of Albany Police Department, Deputy Chief Michael Bonts from the City of Kingston Police Department, and Mike, and I'm going to mess up his last name, Bizaleski from the Monroe County Public Safety Training Facility. And so those folks were our subject matter experts, as well as John O'Neill, who was a contract behavioral analyst that helped us with the review.
Okay. Yep, very good. Does anyone have any other discussions or concerns? Go ahead.
I have to weigh in.
I figured you would, sir.
I took session 2 of this course back in 1972. So it's been around a bit, okay? But for the courses that I've seen and, and hosted at some of the schools, it's still, it's still a very challenging course. It's Education 101, 102, 103 in 2 weeks. So there is a major stress factor. I guess going forward is that originally when this was created, you had to get recertified every 5 years, or I remember having to go through a certification.
3 or 5.
Is that still the case anymore? I don't think so.
No, and Josh, you want to speak to that?
That 5-year requirement was removed years ago. I think out of the thousands of instructor recertifications that came through, I think the percentage of instructor not being recertified was less than 1%. So it was more of a paper exercise. We determined that the agencies at the time, they were making a determination who they wanted to use as their instructor versus going through the 5-year recertification process.
And if there's quote, a bad instructor, basically the local academies take care of it. They just don't invite the person back. I mean, we don't revoke. Wait a minute, we did revoke somebody's instructor status.
Yeah, we did.
There's an instructor not following the MPTC guidelines versus an instructor having a challenging ability to deliver the content, right? There's 2 different things here. Mm-hmm. So yes, if somebody's not following the MPTC guidelines, we certainly hold them to that standard, and there's actions to be taken for that, like the council took not too long ago. But then if there's an instructor who their instructor abilities aren't up to par, usually we rely on the agency to make the determination.
And do we still have the title of master instructor?
We do, and that's required to teach the instructor development course.
And how does one become a master instructor now?
It's a lengthy process, but they have to teach each individual section of the course and be evaluated by another master instructor for those sections before they can be signed off as a approved master.
Over the course of more than 3 sessions as well. So It can't be you just teach the entire course, get signed off. You have to do it over 3 separate distinct offerings of the course at minimum.
Bruce, and just on your point about the instructor, as you remember, we changed the regs a number of years ago, which allowed and had a more clear process for created a director position and created an instructor and created a mechanism upon which we could revoke and suspend them. Those regs went into effect, and then there was the online learning that went around the director. That's been incorporated into here too, so that if we are in the position of having to, as Josh said, someone doesn't follow the MPTC regulations and we have to revoke their instructor certification, there's even more emphasis on what the regs require so that we can further support that in case we are in that position.
Okay, thank you.
And as Johanna mentioned, that component has been added into the IPC course as well. Some of the things that the council took action on a while back, the course director training, what are the requirements to submit to DCJS? What does it mean? What's the potential of being suspended or revoked for not following the guidelines? That has all been included in the IDC course as well as part of the update.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. This requires 1 motion, the way it appears. Chief Parisi, you want to?
Sure, it's very short.
Move that.
I wrote it for you, sir.
Thank you. Motion 1, approve the amendments to the learning objectives as the minimum standard of instruction for the instructor development course.
And to hear a second.
Second.
Second. Chief Corey. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay, that motion passes, and thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next action item is the basic course for police officer opioid antagonist update. Josh, you're on again.
Thank you, Chairman. So on October 7th of 2021, this year, the governor signed Chapter 431 of the laws of 2021, and that amended the Criminal Procedural Law 6049, which actually added language that now prohibits the introduction of possession of an opioid antagonist for the purpose of establishing probable cause for an arrest of possession of controlled substances. So for instance, the possession of naloxone could not be used as probable cause for an arrest of an individual who is in possession of a controlled substance. That section of CPL was added, and as a result, also the bill that the governor signed also added subdivision 7B to section 841 of the executive law, which now requires that municipal police and peace officers receive appropriate instruction regarding this new section 6049 of the CPL effective December 6, 2021. So what that means is our police and peace officer training needs to include this new section 6049, which again requires training on the prohibition of using an opioid antagonist as probable cause for an arrest for possession of a controlled substance. So what we did is it was a fairly simple update. Section 3, Part C of the basic course for police officers, the criminal procedural law section. We amended that section to add 2 new learning objectives. And that was to define an opioid antagonist in the CPL section, as well as then explain the criminal procedural law 6049 as it relates to possession of opioid antagonists. So those two new learning objectives were added to address Executive Law 841 subdivision 7B that was added, that was recently signed by the governor. Again, this is effective December 6, 2021. So we would, if the council approves these new learning objectives to address that section of the law, we'll make these trainings, the training content available to agencies. The update of the CPL section will make those available for agencies to begin training on that new standard. That would be a requirement as per the executive law.
The hours remain the same, correct?
They do. It's a fairly minor update. There was no need to add an additional half hour or an hour. It's fairly minor.
Okay.
And then, in addition to the CPL being amended, the governor also signed Chapter 433 of the laws of 2021, which amended the penal law. And specifically, it amended 22045. It repealed that section in its entirety for the ability to charge an individual with criminal possession of a hypodermic instrument. And the penal law 22003, criminal possession of a controlled substance in the 7th degree, it added language in 22003 to decriminalize possession of a hypodermic needle that has residual amounts of controlled substance, notwithstanding how it's obtained or possessed. Both amendments for these are effective immediately. So the repeal of 22045 and the amendment to 22003, decriminalizing the possession of a hypodermic needle with residual amounts of controlled substance on it, are effective immediately. So in response to that, our basic course for police officers, Part 3, Section F, ancillary statutes, has been amended to include additional instructional content under the learning objective, recognize the elements of syringe access laws. So in there, we added learning content that informs a new recruit officer that you cannot charge for criminal possession of a hypodermic instrument, as well as you can't charge for criminal possession of controlled substance 7th degree if you have an individual with a hypodermic needle with residual amounts of a controlled substance on it. So those amendments have been made, fairly simple. Before I go to the motions, are any questions on those particular amendments to basic course or I guess the law for that matter?
No. I don't believe there's any questions. Doesn't look like it. Are the motions that are in the action item, they're okay the way they are?
Yes, yep. There are motions to amend Part 3, Section C of the CPL, and then also the ancillary statute section, Part 3, Section F.
All right, there's 4 motions involved here. Would council member like to move those motions?
So moved.
So move. And you want to go ahead and read them, and then we'll. Do I hear a second? A second by Chief Corey? Yeah. But let's read them all. We'll read all 4. And then
All right. Thank you. Motion 1, approve the addition of 2 new opioid antagonist learning objectives to Part 3, Section C- Criminal Procedure Law as the minimum standard of instruction in the basic course for police officers or equivalent basic course for peace officers, campus public safety officer course, and specialized investigator course. Motion 2, require all employers and academies conducting the basic course for police officers or equivalent basic course for peace officers, campus public safety officer course, and specialized investigator course to begin utilizing the newly approved Part 3, Section C- Criminal Procedure Law curriculum for courses beginning on or after January 1, 2022. Motion 3, approve the updates made to the syringe access laws learning objective of Part 3, Section F- ancillary statutes as the minimum standard of instruction in the basic course for police officers or equivalent, campus public safety officer course, and specialized investigator course. Motion 4, require all employers and academies conducting the basic course for police officers equivalent, campus public safety officer course, and specialized investigator course to begin utilizing the newly approved Part 3, Section F- ancillary statutes curriculum for courses beginning on or after January 1, 2022.
Okay, thank you. Those are the 4 motions, and we do have a second for those. Any further discussion on those motions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, hearing none, those 4 motions are approved. Thanks, Josh. I think you're still up on the first informational item regarding the defensive tactics training update.
Sure. Again, it was back in 2017, 18, the council approved a complete rewrite of defensive tactics training for at the recruit level of the basic course for police. It's been a smashing success, the program. After the change in the basic course for police minimum standards, following thereafter, we developed a 2-week instructor course to then train the new instructors in the new defensive tactics and principles of control section. As you know, we removed a lot of the techniques that were previously covered and focused on reducing the amount of techniques to actually develop a skill set walking out of the academy where we weren't training multiple techniques, but techniques in a sense that we reduced those numbers so they could be proceduralized and I guess in long-term memory, if you will. Since the rewrite of the DT program, we've trained over 420 officers, new instructors from the 2-week school. We've also conducted 12 booster trainings, which graduated 336 officers. What we found in DT training and really with any hard skills type training is those skills are perishable. And it's very important to continue to offer booster trainings in many areas where hard skill is a perishable skill. One of those certainly is defensive tactics. So although there's no mandate of in-service training for defensive tactics at the in-service level for police officers, we have seen a great success in instructors, DT instructors attending these booster trainings so they continue to refine their skills. We've used these trainings additionally to introduce new topics, focus on different areas of training. It's been a great success and they continually fill up immediately as we offer them. So We're going to continue to move forward with those booster trainings. And it's something as we move, in the future, we're going to look at other topics too that have hard skills involved where they are perishable, such as even firearms training, to talk about and offer, different types of skill set training to continue to further build and enhance their understanding of and their ability and knowledge to deliver these skills. As we do these booster trainings, we get a lot of good feedback from the participants. And one of the holes that we've identified in the training has been we do a really good job of training to get an individual in custody and control. But what happens when an individual continues to resist after the handcuffs are placed on an individual? What do you do? What are techniques that can be used to control an individual who is in custody but continues to resist and fight and is combative, both for the safety of the individual and for the safety of the officer and all those involved? So with our panel of subject matter experts, as well as input from students who attend these booster trainings, we've been in the process of reviewing what are techniques we can train for post-custody incidents. And we're hopefully we'll be ready by the March meeting to present some potential updates to the council for the basic course for police, and as well as to the MPTC 2-week instructor course. And then also we'll continue to roll with the booster trainings as well, and using this as another opportunity to train also our current instructors on these potentially new techniques that we're working on trying to develop and pilot as I speak now. So in anticipation of the March meeting, we hope to have some new content to provide to continue to enhance the skill set, and again, acknowledging the safety of all those involved. We want to have successful resolutions and outcomes to these, certainly challenging incidents, to say the least. So I anticipate in March we'll have some new information to present to the council, hopefully for approval. Any questions on the DT component?
I know in post-handcuffing, it seems like we're seeing more and more spitting and trying to bite, those types of issues. So I'm sure you're addressing those things.
That and recognizing too the difference between a medical emergency, right? We're seeing more conversation now around excited delirium as well, and techniques to handle that incident as well. I think it's a great opportunity for us to look at this and see what we can do and what techniques we can train officers to have even greater successful resolutions and outcomes to these incidents.
Very good. Any other concerns or questions?
No, I think that's good. Okay, good idea. Good
No, thank you. Thank you. The next item is the firearms training update. Michael?
Once again, members of the council, Chairman. Going to just give you a brief update, kind of where we are on the development of the firearms curriculum.
Sure. Okay.
We've been involved in this process. As you know, this is kind of the end of the basic course for police officers. We got some of the low-hanging fruit first, and some of the more challenging sections we save for the end. And so this is definitely one of the more challenging sections. We have been continually, for I would say the past year and a half, in the process of evaluating the current curriculum and figuring out really what we need officers to be able to do relative to a firearm in their normal course of their duties, or what would we ask them to do, and kind of work backward from there and understand that we're building skills. We're asking human beings to acquire skills with a tool. And so I think we've got some good traction now. We've got a panel of subject matter experts from around the state. We've met numerous occasions, includes folks from the NYPD and from the New York State Police as well. I do want to take the time with the fantastic working relationship with both of those organizations. I was just at the NYPD Academy last week for a few days. They gave me free pizza. It was delicious. And spent a lot of time at the New York State Police Academy.
Chicken wings.
I'm actually vegetarian, so fantastic working relationship. They've contributed folks to the panel and to great effect as well. And so then we have a kind of I would say a core group of instructors that make up a smaller panel members, group of panel members have been working with us to develop areas of our instructional curriculum that are potentially lacking in areas, and the way that manifests itself actually at the basic course delivery. And so we've been, I think we're in good shape, right? We're going to pilot the course in the spring of '22. We've already met several times to develop curriculum and to just recently develop visual aids to assist instructors. One thing that we found is that the current delivery is based upon an outline, and it doesn't give instructors enough if they're lacking some of the basics and understanding, which is entirely possible given the current program, that we don't give them enough resources to actually deliver the program the way that we'd like. So the program that we anticipate rolling out and seeking approval in the future is a much more in-depth and resource-heavy program, I think you'll find, than what existed before. It attempts us to control the delivery a little bit more, ensure consistency across the state with respect to these skills. And so we've recently conducted a workshop, called it a workshop. We invited 10 basic course for police officers, instructors from around the state. These are folks that lead the firearms programs within their respective basic course deliveries, and conducted a 3-day workshop. All of them rated it excellent. All of them rated it a necessary component to progressing the firearms program in New York State. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions as to where we're at. I also want to give kudos to Sheriff Todd Hood, who was on our subject matter expert panel. And when we did, Madison County Sheriff Todd Hood, elected sheriff, when we did the firearms workshop, the folks that were members of the panel had an opportunity to either opt in or opt out of participating in the firearms portion of the workshop. The caveat was that if you opt in, you do them all. And Sheriff Todd Hood opted in, and he did everything, all of the stuff that gets you dirty and probably hurts a little bit more as you get older. He engaged in all of that. So I do want to give kudos to Sheriff Todd Hood, representing the Sheriff's Association, for that process. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions about the process, where we are. Really taking a look at the science, how humans learn, how humans acquire skill, and how are those skills retrievable in the future under conditions of stress, real world, where I think traditionally firearms training hasn't acknowledged those things.
Right. To add to, Mike, to your discussion there in the neuroscience of the brain, this is probably one of the first projects that I've been a part of where we're really taking what science has recently showed us about the neuroscience of the brain and how we learn and how we take information, whether it's just knowledge or a skill set, and move it from short-term memory to long-term memory. And our ultimate goal here is to proceduralize the skill sets of firearms training into the long-term memory of a recruit officer, of a new officer. And what that allows too is if the skill set becomes hard and ingrained to the point where now they're able to enhance their decision-making skills, where they're not focused on the actual skill themselves, they're focusing more now on the decision-making skills that involve a use of force incident and potentially a deadly physical force incident. So we're currently structuring the whole entire program based on what we've learned from the science of how much can a recruit officer retain in one day, how much of the physical task can you train in one day to ensure that it gets proceduralized to long-term memory before you introduce a new task, a new skill set, to ensure that your neurons aren't getting cross-fired and you're teaching too many things at once is my point. So we're organizing the content in a way that's based on the science of learning and also the science and how you move information from from short-term memory to long-term memory. And it's incredibly a thoughtful process. We have
maddening is another word.
It could be, yeah.
Methodical.
If you were to look at the spreadsheet of all the tasks that we're trying to train a recruit officer, and then how we're organizing those tasks in a systematic way, to ensure that the officer walks away with hard skills ingrained, as well as even knowledge too, retention of certain knowledge components, for the goal of being better decision makers in a use of force incident. It's almost mind-blowing to see the spreadsheets that what we're doing. So it's an exciting program to be part of, and working alongside Mike with it. We're working with a subject matter expert who's written a few books on this as well, based on the neuroscience of the brain. So I'm looking forward to be able to present this to the council in June, and I'm very excited about the project, and I think it's going to be pretty cutting edge the way it's laid out.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. Hearing something and learning something are two different things.
All right, we forget that as instructors sometimes. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Very good. Any other? Go ahead.
What about the issue of, and I know the focus here is on recruit officers, but what about requal? Because a lot of the issues that you see with recruits sometimes emerge with people that have been on the job, and ideally, I know many agencies requal every, twice a year, sometimes less, but any points on that, or is...
How much time you got, sir?
No.
Requalification, you bring up a very good point. There is no, as you know, mandatory requirement that police officers ever fire their gun once they leave the academy. From a liability standpoint, that would not be advisable. So agencies do requal. Most of them, from my experience, this is anecdotal, but from my experience, essentially use the basic course for police officers, qualification for course as the standard, in the belief that it's been tested and is legally sound and whatnot in terms of skills. Whether or not that's true or not, I would probably argue that it's not true, but there is no mechanism for us to currently require police officers to requalify. If the way that we're conducting the course now and creating the course now, our belief is that there won't be as much degradation of skill for a recruit to an in-service officer, so that if we can get them to meet a particular bar at the exit from the academy, that the degradation of skill that we find currently won't be that drastic in an in-service officer, which hopefully would make qualification, I don't want to say easier in terms of skills, but more productive, and that their qualification can be more of a training day as opposed to a qualification day, which I think benefits everybody.
And Bruce, as you often do appropriately, the importance of, in-service and continuing education, and this is just one area of it, it's definitely a very good point. We appreciate you raising it. As we know, it's not statutorily mandated, but it's a very good point.
Right. No, because as people proceed through their careers, things change, physical agility changes, all kinds of things happen, and sometimes we forget about the requalification and some of the challenges that you have with recruits. You have different types of challenges with people who've been on the job for a period of time. And what do you do if somebody doesn't qualify? So, so you have a whole bunch of issues here.
I would also like to add just one point, if I could, for the council. Just, it's Mike Wood here. Just, we're also very well aware of the fact that there is a statutory requirement for peace officer designations in New York State as well. Just a point of reference.
Thanks, Michael.
I know one of the things that we have found that has really helped us a lot is that every time we do qualifications, in-service qualifications, that we spend an hour and a half on use of force and updates and legal decisions and all of that. And we just continually pound that use of force policy besides, your shooting. So it's important.
Our hope is that the skills portion will enable better decision-making and better use of that declarative knowledge of use of force if we get the skills built properly. Right now, you can see this on videos, you can see this at the range, you see people that essentially lack the sub-skills necessary, and to expect folks that lack those sub-physical skills to be able to employ decision-making, front lobe type brain skills in a tense moment is
especially under stress.
Not realistic.
Very good, thank you.
Is it too early to tell what, it sounds like it's going to be pretty significant changes. So is it too early to tell what that means for current instructors, what the transition is, or is it kind of too early to?
I think, to be honest with you, one of my goals in the outset of this program, and I don't know that this is shared by everybody else, but this is one of my goals, is that if the curriculum didn't change enough that instructor updates weren't necessary, we didn't do a good enough job. So I think there will be some level of instructor updates necessary. What that eventually looks like, I don't know. We've done a 3-day instructor update. I will say that we certainly wanted more time than 3 days and anticipated something more like 5 days for that instructor update.
Okay.
But I'd be more than happy to share with you the reviews from all the folks that did come to that and what that looked like, because I think that is really the best predictor of what needs to occur in terms of instructor updates, is a self-reflective evaluation of those instructors and what they learned from those workshops.
Okay.
To add, we're basically starting from scratch. We wiped out the whole entire course and put that aside and said, okay, what's the knowledge? What are the skill set? What does a recruit officer, what does an officer need to know in terms of firearm skills? And let's build the course from the ground up. So I recognize this is, retraining instructors too is like turning a battleship at sea. I understand that, and I'll be the first to admit it. It's going to be quite a process to retrain instructors. And just like with the DT course, we're going to have a stopgap until we roll out a full instructor course. So we'll get the basic course curriculum identified. What are the core learning objectives, the content, and organized the way I was just mentioning it. Mike has been discussing based on how we learn and how we acquire skills and declarative and procedural knowledge. And then we're going to have a stopgap course similar to what we did out in Syracuse for the 3-day course, where we ran through the instructors all the new concepts that we're looking to train recruits on. Some of the drills, some of the knowledge stuff as well, some of the basic fundamental stuff of even stance and how do you run to one location to another, some basic fundamentals that was never part of the training. So we acknowledge it's going to probably be a full wholesale change, and even for instructors as well. But we're thinking it through, and it's going to be quite a long rollout to get the instructors on board with getting them all trained and up to speed on the new content. But it's definitely the right step in the right direction.
Thank you.
And Josh, we'd be coming back in June, September timeframe, right? So we're talking maybe we'll do an update in March, but we've got a lot of time to work through it.
Well, yeah, so we're anticipating bringing the basic course for approval to the council in June. And then during that, from June on, we want to begin, offering some sort of refresher update training for our current firearms instructors to get them up to speed with the new curriculum, train them on the new skills that we're training on. And then while we're doing that, we'll simultaneously be building out the full instructor course as we move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Sorry. All right.
Chairman, I'd just like to say, and I'm sure you can tell the passion that they have for this training. They've been working very hard on it, and it's going to be very exciting. I think we're going to be leading the country. It's not an area that we've seen as far as, the guys have been talking and looking around. So it's going to be really exciting when we roll it out. And they've really done such an amazing job and thoroughly in researching and trying to figure out a way. So I just want to acknowledge their work on it.
Well, it's a very contemporary, important topic, so appreciate everything. Look forward to hearing more. Very good. Okay, thank you. And next is new business. Any new business? I do have an item I want to bring up for discussion. In your packet, you'll find a reference to correction law, section 137, which is being referred to now as something called the HALT Act. And what we're discovering is that the legislation itself talks about 37 hours. You'll find it about 2/3 of the way down in that paragraph. All hearing officers shall undergo a minimum of 37 hours of training, et cetera. And obviously, New York State Docs would be involved. I would think the State Commission of Correction should opine. It's every county jail facility has a hearing officer or officers that deal with discipline, dealing with rules within those operation of those jails. And of course, if they're talking about the legislation itself talks about training in 2 or 3 different areas, from restorative justice to trauma care to non-punitive therapeutic treatment. In other words, if you put someone in a special housing, that type of thing. But the legislation lacks saying who's responsible for the delivery of this training. A lot of times it'll say that the Municipal Police Training Council is responsible, or DCJS, or you know, whatever, but it doesn't say. There's a lot of concern among the sheriffs that it's going to be effective March 31st, 2022, and whether, you know, how is this going to be accomplished, or what have you. And I know Tom Mitchell is here, who's been concerned, and I know we've been discussing it, but the legislation is mute on whose responsibility it is. So I don't know whether if any other council member we want to generate some discussion on this, or Tom, do you want to speak to it? What your concerns are?
Well, just one thing, Sheriff. The statute requires 2 sets of training. One is training for any officer who's assigned to whether you call it special housing or solitary, whatever. You know, so that officer has to have training. Originally, the statute said that was going to be 37.5 hours of training initially, and then by a later amendment last year, that was changed to just specialized training. So the statute, as you indicated, gives the topics that have to be considered, but no hours. So whether it's 15 minutes or 15 days or whatever, the number of hours, there's nothing that tells us what. But every single officer that's assigned to special housing. So just in the county jails, that's going to be many hundreds of officers that have to have some sort of training. The hearing officers have to have 37 hours of training, and then every year have to have specialized training as well. I forget the exact number of hours every year, but it's court attached to provide that, and that's all got to be in place, and people have to be trained by March 31st. So the concern is if, for example, on hearing officers, if there's no training provided, could a hearing officer provide any kind of discipline or preside over cases? The statute says, I believe that the hearing officer could not do that. I think it's quite a lot of work to do, and again, this is for every single jail in the state of New York. So for larger jails, obviously you talk about probably many officers would have to have the training with respect to those that are assigned to special housing. Smaller jails, there might be 5 or 10, but there's still hundreds of officers that have to be trained, and every county has at least one. Most counties have more than one hearing officer. So it's a pretty big task.
I know that most of these hearing officers would be considered, if they're correction officers, be peace officers. So therefore, it comes around to possibly our attention. I don't know, New York State Docs, have you been in communication with them at all?
We've reached out to them. I haven't talked to them yet. I did talk to Chairman Alan Riley at the Commission of Correction to see if they were going to provide any kind of training. Frankly, he said they were thinking about it, but they want to wait and see what the council did today. I told them that the meeting was not for December 1st. So they may be another avenue for some training. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it or if they want to do it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, the issue is the legislation is kind of silent on whose responsibility it is, and that's part of the problem here. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or concerns.
You mentioned that one agency is thinking about doing the training, or does anybody have a curriculum right now? I guess.
No, I mean, this is a new law.
This is all new.
Yeah, this is all new. So the State Commission of Correction, which used to be very involved in correction officer training, and then several years ago, that was pretty much transferred to this body. So they really don't do much training anymore, but I did talk or emailed with Chairman Riley at the commission, and he said that they are thinking about it, but that's all I have at this point. And he wanted to see what this body was going to do, if anything.
Is it possible for DCJS to take a look at this and work with the other entities to see, does MPTC have any role at all or not? Like I say, the legislation is mute on that, so I just don't know whether we do or we don't. And I would look for some direction.
Yeah, we've looked at it legally, you know, and we don't have any specifically tasked to do it. I think, you know, we certainly, like we always do, are willing to help if the Sheriff's Association or if SCOC would like to, you know, take this on. There's ways in which our staff might be able to assist them. But between now and, you know, March 31st, in an area that we don't have the same level of expertise. It would be a lot to get done in that time, to be honest.
Okay.
Chairman.
I think that would be possible.
I think generally when we develop curriculum, we always go to the subject matter experts.
Exactly.
And we would obviously probably be looking for the Sheriff's Association or anybody else in the corrections community to produce content for this particular, for the HALT Act and for particularly the section.
Some of our counties are already looking at training. I've talked to Orange County and Suffolk County, and some of the larger counties probably going to be the leaders in training because they have more training staff. So they're going to be able to provide us some guidance. But just being able to provide the training, for example, for the 37 hours for hearing officers, how would that be done? I mean, we're not going to get 100 hearing officers or 150, whatever it might be. You go to one location during 1 week. I mean, it's very, very unlikely. It would have to be regional training. How are we going to get a number of instructors to be able to provide the kind of regional training in? And obviously, it's going to be a pretty short period of time. It's not even until March 31st because they're going to be done by then. So it would probably have to be at the latest sometime in early March to have actually provide the training. So there's not a lot of time to do it.
Chair, I'm happy to reach out to docs to facilitate if you haven't heard back.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure if the council does have a role to play that we're engaged, but we may not have. We can't always change legislation or the way it's enacted. Sometimes things could be written a little more clear, but it is what it is. So I appreciate that, Joe.
Yeah, as Johanna said, it's one of the things that DCJS might not have subject matter expertise, but if docs hasn't been, connected, we should see what their plans are and can circle back with the Sheriff's Association.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Is there any other new business that we need to discuss? I know that I spent some time recently with Johanna, where I got a crash course in how to be an administrative judge, I guess, if it comes down to the council being involved in disqualification of a police officer certification. Training and what have you. So I thank you for that.
Welcome, and we're preparing even more materials for you.
Afternoon,
Chairman.
a little different from sheriffing, I could say, but we'll go from there. Anyone else have anything else? Okay. I do want to, since this is our last meeting of the year, on behalf of the council and the members, we do want to thank the DCGS staff for all the good work that's done. And I want to especially mention Allison down there, who takes all the minutes. And oftentimes you don't get mentioned, but you're very important.
Thank
and
you.
We thank you for all your good work, and we thank all the staff, DCGS, for all the support that's given and all the good information. Oftentimes the information is so well put together that we may have a few questions, but we don't have a lot because it's well done, and we're very lucky in the state to have that. So and we welcome our new acting commissioner and Joe, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
And thank you all. And with that, I would entertain unless anyone else has anything to say.
So moved.
Have a happy holiday coming up, and motion made, second, all in favor, aye? Aye. Folks, say, okay, thank you all very much.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Yep,
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much.
So you get to wear a black robe.